Palo Alto studio connecting Silicon Valley and Wall Street. I'm John Furrier, the coaching team here with Dave Vellante, my co-host. Hello, I'm John Furrier with theCUBE. We are here at theCUBE's NYSE studio, the NYSE Wired program, a CUBE original. Here's our mixture of experts. We're bringing in experts to unpack the trends. Obviously, data growth. Data importance has become the key conversation to enable the generative AI waves. Of course, the agentic infrastructure is developing. Felix de Maele is here, CEO of Collibra, a company we've covered. I mean, going back over a decade during the big data wave, now hitting mainstream. Felix, great to have you on theCUBE. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've been covering you guys also, but also the importance of big data when it was really emerging. But now with the supercomputing capabilities, with all the generative AI conversations in the past 4 years in particular, everyone sees the magic. It's not just dashboards now, this is real action, yes, real work. Agents put a little premium on that as well. So you've been doing this for a while. It's almost like the world spun to your doorstep.
Yes.
You know, tell us how you're feeling.
Exactly, we almost come full circle. Like, think of Collibra today as being the enterprise AI control plane. So simply said, two things, context and control. And to your point, we've been doing that for a long time. We've built a winning data governance foundation and doing context and control, typically for chief data officers. How do you make sure analytics, data consumers are able to find data easily? Yeah. But now I think we're in this incredible transformation where it's not just people consuming data, it's agents and models consuming data. And so how do you govern the context, the input to those models becomes incredibly important. Yeah. And then how do you ensure the control around all the agents, all the models across all your different platforms to have the visibility, the traceability, the certainty to be able to kind of move forward with AI? Really important.
You know what's interesting, Felix, is that when you look at your business and what we've been covering, there's two threads. I want to get your thoughts on this because this thread one, the line of business now is instrumental in the agentic piece and some of the value being created and extracted. But you also have the tech piece, the databases, plural, the analytics businesses. And in the past it was, you know, hey, build me a data lake, CDOs were coming out, and the chief data officers. Those were dashboards for the line of business.
Yes.
Okay, great. That has merged with generative AI, and now you have the intersection of analytics kind of decisions, but the line of business has changed. So you got the technical, get the data right, which is a whole set of conversations, and then also the line of businesses are leaning in saying, I can actually drive revenue.
Yes.
And this, I don't need a dashboard, I need action.
Yes.
Dashboards are great, but I need to have action. What's your thoughts on those two threads?
Absolutely, we're shifted to agentic AI. It's all about, to your point, action, making decisions, automating tasks, autonomous agents. And what's really critical is what we've learned is to do that effectively, you have to start from the business process. So you have to involve the line of business. And actually to make it work, you have to really align both the technical teams and the business teams. Because what we've also learned, what's really important, is to build that what we call ontology, that semantic model, that description of your business, becomes absolutely critical to provide that as context to the agent. So it's no longer enough to just connect the data to the agent. You have to teach the agent of how to interpret your business, how to navigate your business. And that business model, that semantic model, that ontology, across line of business and kind of technical stakeholders becomes incredibly important.
And the importance of data at scale with low latency. Again, sounds easy to say. Scope the problem and opportunity of that, because saying I'm going to be horizontally scaled across all the data in real time, almost real time, is hard.
And it gets worse, because the last 10 years we've been mostly focused on structured data. Today we have to look at unstructured data as well, and we know like 80% of the data in an organization is unstructured data. We've got many clients, they have thousands of SharePoint sites with hundreds of thousands of documents. How do you bring those documents, make those AI ready to be consumed by an agent, by a model? And I think what's starting to become a really big priority for our customers is what we call ROI, like the cost of tokens is not free. And so how do you help kind of drive better ROI, reduce cost, to not have an agent look at 100,000 documents, but make that ready and really serve 10 highly relevant curated documents, which of course helps not just in cost, but also to your point on speed. Because an agent is not going to take a minute to think, it's going to do it in 10 seconds.
It's only as good as the data can get, and that's key that they get access to that data. All right, so I've been talking to a bunch of CFOs lately because they're getting involved in a lot of this operational kind of business model reset. And explain the importance of separating out the data piece from the models. I was on a thread last night, I was talking to a bunch of nerds around from NVIDIA and right other infrastructure data people, and the techniques to get like using byte level inference. It's going to change the performance of how the models are working.
Yes.
But that's separate from, say, the data planning.
Yes.
Talk about that nuance, because most people think it's one thing. Explain the importance of that piece.
Yes, it's not one thing. We would argue it's three things, right? One is the models, and I think the models are getting incredibly strong, right? And we've really seen over the last 6 months incredibly performance improvements on the models, and we're going to continue to see that. But then enterprise AI, it's all about, okay, we're going to take a model, open source, foundational model, but how do we connect our organization's data to that model? So there's definitely the data component, and we've seen a lot of innovation in the data platform side. But what I think is critical is that layer in the middle. People call it the knowledge graph, the ontology, the semantic model. It's basically the interpretation of the data. How do you connect the data to the model? How do you make sure the model interprets the data? And so it's a simple analogy, but the way I think about it is, think of agentic AI as putting a Formula One car in an autonomous vehicle, very powerful, very smart. But the roads is the data it drives on, but you still need the Google Maps to tell the agent where to go, otherwise it's just going to run
you still need the driver.
The drivers, 100%.
In this case, software or person. You know, you mentioned ontology. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I'd love to get your thoughts on, because you've seen the waves in the DevOps side with data, and that drove a lot of the cloud analytics. Now we're seeing that on-prem, a lot more on-premise activity.
Yes.
When I hear ontology, I hear people saying, I want to be like Palantir. And it reminds me of when everyone wanted to be like Google.
Yes.
Have an SRE, site reliability engineer. So during the DevOps movement, no one can be like Google, because Google was Google.
Yes.
But what that meant was they could be cloud native.
Yes.
So we're starting to see kind of an AI native playbook where ontologies, words like that, mean things that data is represented differently so that it can be consumed properly. And so I think there's a little parallel between this, I want to be like Palantir, I want to be like Google, SRE. So like, I think this movement is real.
I think it's real, and it matters, and I think there's two things that change. And it's interesting, I said we go full circle. We actually started Collibra based on academic research on semantic technology and ontology like 18 years ago. So that's kind of the full circle part. But I think there's two things that happened. One, the reason to build these ontologies or semantic models is much more important. Because before we could rely on people and the judgment of people to do the right thing. Today we can't. Agents are going to make a decision. If they don't know, they guess, they hallucinate, and we have this hallucination tax that's becoming real. And so this is why having an ontology is so important. The second important factor is building an ontology was incredibly difficult. We always said you need like a bunch of PhDs to do it. It's hard to scale. But now LLMs are actually great at building that ontology semi-automatically. And I think that's the real unlock. It's both more important and easier to actually build.
So given that ontologies can be generative, so to speak, which is hard, which is a gift, by the way, with supercomputing and LLMs. Talk about that piece of scale, because when you have that kind of capabilities, the word context is important.
Yes.
So context and governance are two areas you guys thrive in.
Yes.
Contextual relevance can be ontology or knowledge graph based generatively. So situational analysis, a decision. And then governance, who has the data?
Exactly.
Explain those two pieces. I think that ties in.
Exactly. I think these are the two kind of the two dimensions. Context is what you provide into the data, and the two metrics that matter is one, task completion, and providing better context that allows agents to have a higher task completion rate, really important. But also importantly, as we talked about, token consumption. If I provide better context, the agent is going to move faster with less tokens, and so cheaper and faster. It really matters. And so governing that context, standardization around metrics, like what do we mean as a customer, what's a trade, how do we define it, really, really important. And then to your point, the governance and the control around what do we actually have? Like so many organizations have experimented with AI over the last 24 months. They have shadow AI all over the place. They have models running all over the place, agents running all over the place. They have no idea what data is being used by what model, who's responsible, what's the use case, what are the risk qualifications. So governing that, having visibility, traceability, auditability, and then importantly, having a policy framework that defines what an agent can actually do. Because to your point, if they can autonomously take actions and make decisions, having real intentionality about what decision they're allowed to make, it becomes really, really important.
All right, I want to get into the enterprise, because I think last year was the year we saw a lot of activity. Gen 1, the generation 1 of generative AI was RAG, retrieval augmentation generation, good marketing copy, good documents, good blogs, whatnot. Then we saw coding come in. Coding, clear ROI on that. Either stuff gets shipped, the code is good, products get better, revenue gets generated. So that was a key tipping point, in my opinion. You probably would agree. That's now opening the door for agents. And so now the enterprise is ripe Last year was a little bit slow adoption. This year we're seeing a lot more enterprise activity because the price of tokens, everyone's getting Claude and Gemini and Codex, and they're like, wow, this is great.
Yes.
If the data's done right,
exactly.
get it. But now the tokens cost money, so you're seeing a trend towards, I'll buy a server, a Dell server, an IBM server, whatever, put it on-prem, have unlimited tokens.
Exactly.
That's going to, we think, open up and lift the enterprise market.
100%, and this is where we're in this phase of innovation where I think the fragmentation is only going to increase, right? We're not in a phase of some consolidation, we're in a phase of innovation, rapid change, cloud models, on-prem models, open source models, foundational models. I think it's hard to commit to one area because things are just moving so quickly, and this is also what we're seeing with our customers. They want flexibility. They want flexibility to be able to use foundational models, open source models, on-prem models with AI factories. They also want flexibility on the data side, structured data, unstructured data. So how do you navigate that becomes really important, but having flexibility on both sides becomes really important.
And what's your advice to clients right now, your customers? Talk about some of your momentum. Obviously the governance piece, you guys have been doing that for over a decade. Again, it's hard to replicate. There's diseconomies of scale if you want to try to stand up proper governance.
Exactly.
Talk about the enterprise opportunity.
Yeah, so we've worked with over 700 very large organizations. They've built that kind of semantic model, that map, if you will, of their entire data landscape in Collibra, so it just accelerates the adoption of AI tremendously. They've also already implemented their governance practices, workflows, life cycles, and processes, so they can, again, use that to do AI with a new product called AI Command Center to start governing your models and your agents. We've got over 50 customers using that already, and that becomes a really big focus area. Again, one for compliance reasons, which is not going to go away, right? Data security,
and
data
sovereignty.
privacy, sovereignty becomes a huge topic. And also, again, ROI and the life cycle. What we still see is there's still a lot of hesitation of like real impactful use cases. Everybody has a copilot, right? But having a customer chatbot that actually talks to your customers, that's much more impactful. And I think the governance required to say yes to a use case like that becomes like a bottleneck. So how do we accelerate that process to actually be able to deliver highly impactful use cases, driving ROI and impact in production?
Give some examples of those use cases, because right now in the agentic world, you're seeing the haves and have-nots, the winners and people trying hard. And there's a playbook emerging where some people could have different approaches, do a pilot, or do a core problem, get the ROI and drive revenue. And the third approach is I call the failed approach, which is spray a bunch of pilots out into the edges and the fringe, and they just die. It's like sending someone to Siberia to work. It's like no one's there. And then they get the evidence, oh, we don't want agents, so that's kind of a pre-built failure. But the ones that are successful either pick something. What use cases do you see the enterprises, the successful ones, doing? Yeah,
of course you mentioned coding. That's kind of mainstream now. Everybody's seeing the ROI. It's still a lot of work around building the right harness to that well. But you're absolutely right. I think we started with like spray and pray almost, like let's see what works. I think now I see much more intentionality. We're working with a big pharma company that says like, hey, how do I make sure that my next drug discovery is fueled by AI, right? And we're going to really go big and investing, building the entire infrastructure to do that. So there's a lot of focus to drive real impact with AI.
It's interesting you bring that up because I was riffing on theCUBE this past weekend with some folks around the psychology of pilots. In the IT world, it was risk management. Let's test it out, see how it goes. Then shadow IT was put your credit card down, go to the cloud, get your hand slapped, and then get promoted. You run the project. So that shadow IT was kind of a feature. Shadow AI is happening, but you're seeing the intentionality of the risk management. When the line of business people are involved, they know what they have as problems. And now that the technology is faster and more powerful, they're seeing stuff that they can get at now that they couldn't in the previous generation. And that's affecting selection. What's your thoughts on that? Can you share any data around that trend if you believe it?
I think it's incredibly empowering, right? Like the business lines are actually able to kind of truly automate processes, do things they never thought was possible. But it's still quite technical, we found, to truly put an agent in production. It's not just drag and drop, click, click, click. For simple use cases, yes. But if you want to build a real impactful use case in production, you need to build a harness, you need to do the context governance. There's a lot of technical engineering that's still required.
Who's involved in the technology? Platform engineering? Is
Platform engineering, AI engineering. I think that the CTO, CIO office needs to be heavily involved. This is what we found. It's still a quite technical job.
It's like a new persona, I call it the super CIO. Because they have to kind of have that command. The AI person wasn't around. they're new. It's not your data analytics person, it's the AI person.
It's really interesting to see that trend. Like when we started at Collibra, there was no chief data officers, and we've been able to ride the wave where now everybody has a chief data, chief analytics officer. And now we're seeing the same thing happening with chief AI officers. I think the research shows that over 70% of Fortune 2000 have a chief AI officer. Sometimes data and AI is the same person. We think that makes a lot of sense, but sometimes it's a completely different person. But it shows the need to have a person in the organization that cares about value and that cares about control and visibility.
So it's kind of a hybrid position. That chief AI officer tends to be someone who inherits the job because they were either CTO or close to the action, I think, versus a new position.
Exactly. It's typically an evolution of a position either coming up from the data world or coming up from the CTO, like the engineering world. But of course, somebody has deep connection into the business as well, because this is where the real value lies.
Yeah, I think that chief AI officer role is pretty important. And also, there's different philosophies. The chief AI officers that I talk to, half of them say, I want to be out of this job as fast as possible because I would have done my job. Exactly. And the other one's like building a kingdom with direct reports and full core competency organization. Is that just evolution? Do you see it? Is that more situational? Well, is there a better path? I mean, does one win out of the other? What's your thought on that? Or is it more company specific?
I think it's company specific and maybe industry specific. Again, if you to the analogy of what we've seen in data, it depends on company culture and to industry. Like in a highly regulated industry, the cost of doing it wrong is just so impactful that the trade-off of that, are we going to do it versus not going to do it? Often we're just not going to do it. And then having one leader that truly kind of oversees that and truly governs and control that becomes really valuable and really important.
So control point service.
Like financial services, healthcare, pharma, the stakes are really, really high. You can't get it wrong. In other organizations, it makes sense to maybe to drive their culture change, have it a temporary job where ultimately it needs to sit across the whole business, because this is going to be the reality for everybody going forward.
All right, so I have to ask you, since you brought up the word change, how is the change management different in the AI side than it was in the data side? Can you share your thoughts on what's the same and what's different?
It's a great question. Again, we've been doing data governance, and it requires a lot of change. It's not just storing more data, it's actually who's responsible for the data. We're seeing the same thing happening with AI. It's organizational change. I think it's business process change. We're a strong believer to truly deliver value with agentic use cases. You have to solve the end-to-end business process. It's not just one task, it's the end-to-end business process, and often that requires a completely rethinking of that process. So business process change becomes important, and then roles and responsibilities, accountability. Who's accountable? Is it the person that actually builds the agent, who's some engineer? Probably not. Is it the CMO, the CRO, the CFO that oversees the department? Maybe. So I think that's something that organizations have to work through.
All right, so given the market's pretty hot for you guys as well as everyone, opportunities are great, it's a great time to be alive, as we say. What's changed for you guys the most with your engagements with customers on the motion side? Take us through the day in the life.
Yeah, so it's one, we briefly talked about it, data governance is sexy again. In some ways, people realize the foundation truly matters. And the biggest change, what I see is, I call it from design time governance to runtime governance. Because now agents are using the data foundation in real-time ways, no longer just people, right? And a person can wait a month, not great, but an agent is not. And so from runtime to design time, so the stakes are much higher, it becomes way more mission critical, and just the realization of we need to do this, and we need to do this now. And to your earlier point, having standardization and consistencies across the organization becomes really important. So we've really seen the adoption skyrocket.
What about the impact to the C-suite? More teamwork, CIOs involved, obviously CISO, those are classic personas. But you get the CFO and the Chief Human Resource Officer is involved. They're workers. I mean, you got all kinds of new things. What's the dynamic? Because the line of business now is crucial stakeholders, not just budget and go do IT. They're critical. They're orchestrating. What's the C-suite impact?
The reality is collaboration is absolutely critical. Every person is a huge stakeholder, right? The CHRO, to your point, you could argue agents are like people that need to be managed, right? And so the agents have an identity. How do we think about that? How do we think about performance? Obviously, the CTO, CIO, super valuable and critical around building a consistent platform, building harnesses to make sure agents operate in the right way. And then the business stakeholders, this is where the use cases live, right? This is where the value lives. So making sure all of them kind of work effectively together. And this is what we've seen with a lot of companies building AI councils. Because just having all those stakeholders collaborate becomes critical.
I mean, we're building an AI substrates, infrastructure. At the end of the day, software's got to run on something. And hybrid cloud, luckily, is standard. All right, final question. What are you focused on now? Obviously, you got a great market opportunity. TAM's growing for you guys. Products in a good position. You got a tailwind. What are you focused on? What are you optimizing for?
Yeah, we have an amazing foundation, and now how do we kind of focus really on those two things that I talked about, like the context, how do we govern context to ensure that agents run better, faster, cheaper, and then how do we drive the control so organizations are able to kind of move faster with significant use cases into production. Those things, I think, matter enormously, and I'm really excited to see where the.
Well, Felix, thank you for coming on theCUBE. Great to see you. Thanks for stopping by and sharing.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, Collibra is doing great work. Again, the data governance, when they've done the work and they're in a good position, it's hard to get it right. You get the governance right, you get the context right, the agents will do their job and hopefully implement great projects. This is theCUBE here at the NYSE Wired Studio. Thanks for watching.